Hello YouTube, Shadow Hero 90 here. As you can already tell, I've been doing this show for about 3 years at this point, and in addition to the reasons as to why I do this, which I brought up last year, I am now actually going to state a few more reasons why I do this. One of which is that the portrayal of men in movies and TV is essentially toxic. And I mean really toxic. Men are... To be honest, I can't believe that I'm one of the only very few people who legitimately thinks that this kind of portrayal is not only toxic, but completely unfair. Second of which is the fact that these cartoons are aimed at kids, and they do not send a good message. Most of the time, a lot of these shows are role model shows, and the characters exist for the sole purpose to be imitated, and yeah, in doing so, you send some really horrible messages. And the last possible reason I could think of is that not this, but all these shows are pushing a political agenda. To be more precise, the political agenda comes in the form of a princess character whose initials are J and B. I'm pretty sure you can figure out who I'm talking about on those initials alone. But yes, a lot of these shows, and to extension, a lot of these role model shows, are pushing a political agenda. And as a white heterosexual man, I really don't want kids being indoctrinated because it could lead to a bad future. In fact, I really hope some really smart boy sees this show and it actually gets him thinking about sexism, and it causes him not to be indoctrinated to the feminist agenda that a lot of TV shows, cartoons, and movies are pushing. Especially a certain movie that will go unnamed that used a princess character whose initials are J and B to push their political agenda. As much as this intro actually does seem like a bad rant about the negative presentation of men and boys in the media, this is completely serious, and these 3 reasons I gave for doing the show are actual reasons. Now, that being said, if you agree with me on this, that's good. So just sit back and enjoy the review. Okay, on this episode of Sexism in Movies and TV, I'm going to be tearing apart the pervert trope. And as you can see, I have a photo up of the most famous pervert on TV right now, Glenn Quagmire from Family Guy. Okay, for starters, let's go down by starting with the fact that the pervert trope is by no means true or realistic. In fact, I personally have known guys in the past who were not boner-driven animals, and yes, I do personally know them and can say that they are decent people. They're not the evil, psychotic, perverted rapists that basically almost every show on TV that isn't based off something wants you to believe men are. As well as there being men that I don't know personally who are by no means pervs. There are people on the internet who I've never met who I actually know are decent human beings. And in my own defense, I myself am not a pervert, even when I was in high school. And yes, this is where I went to high school. It was torture. In my own defense, yet again, I am not a pervert, and I know what boundaries are. I mean, I have both a men's rights playlist and an anti-feminism playlist on my channel. And no, neither one of these things would make me gay. I'm a men's rights activist. I always have been. In fact, I've been an advocate for men's rights even before I knew that the men's rights movement was even a thing. Okay, enough about me. Let's get back to explaining why the pervert trope is bad. The Csi Effect, which, yeah, that goes hand in hand with the pervert trope, is when people take what they see on TV and apply it to reality. In other words, they see something on TV, like, say, a Lifetime made-for-TV movie, and apply it to reality at face value. This is a major league problem in modern-day American TV because it convinces all women that men have no control over their sexuality. And when I say that, I mean that it convinces them that all men want to have sex with them 100% of the time, all the time, and without fail. This is very bad. It's a very toxic message to promote. And its promotion has actually convinced all of society that men and only men can be rapists. This is very bad for a number of reasons. You see, in modern day society, men actually can get raped by both women and men. And the truth is that if a man got raped by a woman, no one would really take him seriously. If he goes to the police, they will both laugh and not believe him. If he goes to anyone else, whoever he goes to will just give him the same response that the police did. And that's kind of the thing. Despite what this network would have you believe, not all men are rapists. In fact, most men know what boundaries are, and if a man feels like he is gonna force himself onto a woman, that is a mental illness. Same thing if a woman decides she needs to force herself onto a man, which can happen. And the pervert trope is a problem because it literally convinces people that the scenario of a woman raping a man cannot happen, even though it can. Another effect that the pervert trope has in television is that it paints all women as either lesbian, bisexual, or asexual, even if the character is heterosexual, and all these idiots watching who have succumbed to the Csi Effect literally think that that's how reality is. That all men are perverted little weasels like Ray Barone, and that their wives are so stuck up they might as well be lesbians. Asexual or bisexual. Another problem that the pervert trope causes is the fact that it paints all sex offenders as men. Coming from someone who's actually done the research, the majority of sex offenders are women. And not only are they women, but they're actually teachers. In my research, I heard about one who actually used a dildo on a baby. So believe me when I say, the media's portrayal of sex offenders is 100% fucked up and 100% exaggerated. If it wasn't, we'd see a lot more female characters in the sex offender category. This next one is pretty much the sister problem to the pervert trope, making it look like all sex offenders are men. And that's the fact that it paints the media perception that all sexual harassers are men. That is not true. Believe me when I say so. I am a man and I have been sexually harassed by women. And if you knew the names of the two bitches who touched me, you'd be very surprised and wondered why I never even thought of calling the cops. Okay, and here is the third problem that the pervert trope causes that doesn't really have any show, game, movie, etc. linked to it. Now, I'll admit, this is a double standard, but women have tons of double standards that they love to hide behind. And that's the fact that men cannot be sluts. This graph shows the normal nuclear family and their kids. The green bar represents money and who the provider, usually the husband, the money that he makes. As you can see on the left side, these are all the babies that were conceived without cheating, as in both parents had a say in the babies being born. This chart shows the results of a husband cheating and who pays for it. As we can see by the green bar that represents money, the husband is both supporting all 4 of the babies that he helped conceive. And this is a chart that shows how the wealth would be disputed to support a baby that was conceived by the wife cheating. As you can see, the husband is supporting all 3 of the babies he and his wife conceived, but on the other hand, he's supporting the baby that was conceived when his wife decided to cheat on him. So in short, men can't be sluts because of the way that custody laws, divorce laws, and alimony laws have been written. In other words, if a man cheats on his wife and the woman gets pregnant, he still will provide for that child regardless. But if it's the other way around, this poor sap will end up having to support and pay for a child that wasn't even his to begin with. And this may be a double standard, but to a certain extent, men also cannot be cheaters. Women can cheat on their husbands because if they have a baby, the man will end up paying for that baby. But if a man is in a polygamous lifestyle or has a lady on the side and one of them gives birth, he will end up paying for that baby. So yeah, to a certain extent, men cannot cheat on their wives. To a certain extent, that idea is impossible. In the 1960s and 70s, during the rise of feminism, we kind of did get an evolution of the female character. Or as The Last Jedi / Force Awakens critics have complained, the de-evolution of the female character, in which the female is no longer a damsel in distress. She's strong and independent, but when you really look at it, she can only look strong when all the male characters are complete idiots and buffoons. And this is something that the pervert trope kind of takes into consideration. They basically make it look like all men are perverts, and therefore they need to be shown up or beaten up by a strong, independent character. And now I'm gonna rip apart how this is bad in other shows. And when I say rip apart, I mean I'm gonna be doing this like a top 10 list. So anyways, here are the top 7 examples of the pervert trope in movies and TV. In the episode of The Simpsons, Bart's Girlfriend, they really don't make it clear whether or not Bart is essentially driven by basically hormones or if he's actually in love with this girl, even though the episode points more to love than hormones. But yeah, since this was the episode that made me decide to review the pervert trope, this should be the one I talk about first. Because it is not hormones. Bart really did love this piece of garbage. Why? I don't know. But to be honest, Matt Goring is a liberal beta male feminist, and so it kind of makes sense that he'd write it this way. And yeah, eventually I am going to tackle his work as well. 'Cause Bart Simpson really seems like he's in love here, and it does not sound like he's thinking with his dick. Family Guy, any episode with Quagmire in it. You see, in the first 3 seasons, Quagmire being a sex pervert was his entire character. But when the show was revived in the early 2000s, he was still a pervert, but eventually, around 2006, he did get character development when we met his sister Brenda and his transsexual father. But he's remained a pervert, and his actions go from kidnapping, rape, sexual harassment, voyeurism, and worst of all, pedophilia. So, to an extent, that is what Family Guy thinks. It's hard to believe that this character doesn't get any backlash. Because thanks to every Lifetime movie of the week, this is what the brain-dead idiots who watch Lifetime think men are. And it really doesn't help with stuff like Playboy, Hustler, other pornography distributors, and the sexual revolution as a whole, essentially making Glenn Quagmire out to be the everyman, which he is not. Because of everything I listed before, people, mostly men, have been brainwashed into thinking that they have to show off their heterosexuality as much as humanly possible. If they don't, people assume that they're gay. And this is a really big problem. I know that because I am speaking from experience. You see, growing up, I was very responsible. I was by no means a sex-crazed pervert who would sell his soul for a night of fun with a woman, or in this case a girl, just to end up risking that night of fun blowing up in my face the minute she got pregnant. But all my friends were. I did not have a very good social life as a teenager. And all my friends, they were scum. They dropped me like a hot potato the minute that it was established that I wasn't going to conform. I would not go along with their groupthink. I wasn't going to risk my future for a night of drunken fun with some random bitch. And that I was not a sex-crazed pervert. In fact, not being a pervert made me such a social outcast that my only human interactions were with my family, my comic book guy, and my card guy. Trading cards. Johnny Bravo, most episodes. This cartoon was unbelievably sexist. Despite being a show for kids, it relied heavily on the pervert trope. So much so that if they didn't create Pops and Carl characters for Johnny to work off of who were not hot women for him to hit on and then get beat up by, actual fathers would have seen this, they would have complained, and Cartoon Network might have actually gotten sued over this. It's the sort of thing that could have made controversy because of how unbelievably sexist it was. And believe me, there are a lot of people out there who think that most men are supposed to act like Johnny Bravo. And I say this from experience because I knew dicks like that in high school and in college. This was a very offensive one-note gag that somehow dragged a cartoon series. The next season was definitely better because it featured Carl and Pops, characters that Johnny could play off of without resorting to this stupid, sexist, garbage joke. Raymond from Everybody Loves Raymond, no particular episode. Okay, so Ray Barone is essentially a perverted little weasel who is in a marriage that is so dysfunctional that almost every episode that involves Deborah, a lot of them involve Raymond trying to sneak off to go to the golf course, even though he does provide for his family. And if he has to sneak off to go to the golf course, that is a major league sign that their relationship is dysfunctional. And if you think that's dysfunctional, Raymond is perverted on a level where he's essentially nagging Deborah for sex in not every, but almost every bedroom scene in the show. After Robert broke up with Amy and was dating someone else, Raymond actually had to beg Robert, or at least try to beg him, to get back together with Amy, saying that he's just now getting his hearing back, and that if Robert doesn't, Raymond will end up as a deaf sex beggar. The character is obsessed with sex. It's a horrible portrayal, and I can see why when the news did cover it, they actually used him as their example. Super Sentai Ohranger, episode Suddenly a Traitor. Bara Darts is definitely a pervert. Why he'd be attracted to normal women when he himself is a robot is beyond me. But apparently he is. Probably just so this episode could happen. It's sad that the pervert trope has literally gotten out of America and into foreign TV shows and films. Because the Machine King here is one out of the only two characters in this episode who doesn't have his head completely shoved up his ass for the sake of the plot. The pervert trope was very heavy in this episode, to the point where it was Bara Darts' undoing. Yeah, but believe you me when I say, if any studio produced a show or a film where you had some robot girl out to destroy humanity, and she eventually gave up that mission because some guy came into her life and she developed feelings for him, it would not go over well with the public. In short, this portrayal is bad because it takes the pervert trope to a whole new level, implying that even inhuman monsters can be attracted to your typical everyday slut. Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, Invitation. Not only was this the first film in the series to break continuity, but they did it in a completely sexist manner when the girl was trapped by the cult, and the only reason that she made it out alive is because this pervert here, who the cult had treated like garbage, essentially just snaps and saves her. first time we see this guy in the film, he basically is hitting on the leading lady and gets scolded by the cult leader. And to add insult to injury, this is a cult, a woman-only cult, might I add, that teaches that all men are parasites and essentially is taking every trait of the modern woman and applying it to men. I say that because the modern woman doesn't have any good traits at this point. Ricky, I think his name was, there's no reason given as to why he hangs out with the cult or does their bidding, 'cause he killed the heroine's boyfriend and every member of the guy's family except his brother for the cult. And at the end, when they're going to sacrifice the heroine in some deranged ritual, Ricky here is the one who saves her by shoving his mistress off a building or something. And the movie does not end with him dating the heroine or even getting thanked in any way. This is just major league insulting. If we did this in a realistic manner where the genders would be swapped, it would not go over well with the hypocritical, politically correct public. Ghosts of Girlfriends Past. The entire movie. I mean, the concept behind this piece of shit film is horribly misandric. Basically taking what is the equivalent of a MGTOW and making him Ebenezer Scrooge and essentially being hounded by the ghosts of girlfriends past. That's one thing, but then this movie gets even more insulting when they make the guy's mentor not only a pervert, but a deranged pedophile who would hit on a teenage girl. Not to mention the portrayal of the male lead by Matthew McConaughey, this clown, is so pathetic that he gives up on love because this bitch doesn't date him in high school or something like that. But it kind of gets worse when this guy in the movie actually goes after her because she's dating his brother. I'm just saying, this is pathetic. Outside the groom, the only portrayal of men in this sexist piece of garbage is a pathetic, whiny little pervert who's so bent out of shape about not getting the girl he wanted in high school that he's willing to go after her when she's dating his brother, or the guy who mentored this character who is a pedophile. I'm just saying, you don't go after a woman who's about to get married. and you don't hit on teenage girls. In short, Ghosts of Girlfriends Past is an unbelievably sexist and misandric piece of feminist garbage. Its portrayal of men is horrible, and Matthew McConaughey should be banned from Hollywood for having anything to do with this movie. In closing, I'm going to be getting a really big elephant out of the room. And that's something that anyone who isn't completely retarded, doesn't have their head up their ass, and is watching this video is going to agree with. And that's the fact that if the left wants to have the pervert trope and portray all heterosexual men as perverted morons and perverted weasels, then the right should be able to portray all women who are heterosexual as mentally handicapped, good-for-nothing prostitutes who only date men because they have money. It's only fair. The liberals get the pervert trope, everyone else gets the slut shame. And saying otherwise is extremely hypocritical.